K98 Talk is expanding its lineup for 2015. This means we are expanding our advertising base. Whether you're a startup trying to push through to the next level or an established business trying to supplement your advertising budget, web-based advertising is a solid investment. Thanks to Talk's newest partnership with TuneIn Radio and instant access to our sister station, K98 FM, we give you worldwide access at a reasonable cost. Interested parties should email us at sales@k98fm.com. K98talk.com, a leader in internet radio. So grab your seatbelts and take the ride of your life on K98talk.com.
They say we offer simple answers to complex problems. But perhaps there is a simple answer. Not an easy answer, but simple.
It's common ground. It's common ground. It's common ground. It's common ground.
We have serious problems to solve, and we need serious people to solve them.
Republicans and Democrats.
All right, folks, good morning. This is Finding Common Ground. Sorry about that little bit of dead air for about 10 seconds there. Helps if you remember to hit the right button. Anyway, I am Rick Robinson, one of the co-hosts here at Finding Common Ground, joined today by Bryce Robbins, my not-so-routine co-host. But good morning, sir. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. How are you, Rick?
I don't know. It's been one of those weeks again. Maybe about 85% of where I was before I got sick. Still just seems like recovery is moving really, really slow.
All right, well, get well, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I feel better physically and emotionally. I mean, I'm not as drained as I was. I don't know how I did everything that I realized, because I didn't realize how much I was actually doing, I guess, when I was doing it all before I got sick. And then I got sick, and everything started slowly not getting done because I couldn't function. And now I'm trying to get back to the point where I'm doing it all again, and I'm like, how in the world did I do all of this, all of that, and work a full-time job? Because it's just like, I run out of energy now at like 8 o'clock at night. By 8 o'clock at night, I'm just like, okay, I'm done. Gotta go to bed, falling over. And I'm not going to lie. For the longest time, I was maybe getting 3-4 hours of sleep a night tops. Now I'm lucky. I'm lucky if my body's not trying to force me to get 12. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know. Maybe my body finally realized I'm old. I don't know.
Age is just a number.
Yeah, until your body catches up with you, and then it's like, no, you're old. Sit down and shut up. All right, so lots of stuff going on in the news. A few different things I kind of wanted to touch on now. For those of you who normally tune in and listen to us from 8 to 10, this show, for several reasons, and the show that I do on Saturday mornings will likely be shortening. For now, the general consensus is we're going to run everything for 3 hours back-to-back live radio, Finding Common Ground, into Opinion Nation, and then finishing off with America Off the Rails. That will likely start running from 9 to noon Central. Of course, if that changes, we will definitely let folks know. Part of the reason we're making the change is because, again, I do 8 shows a week, so 10 hours of radio was getting to be problematic. Yes, I'm only cutting down to 8, but that still frees up quite a bit of my Saturday to do the other things that I have not been able to do because, again, I used to be staying up till like midnight, 1 in the morning to get them all done, and I just haven't had the energy to do that lately. So I'm hoping this frees up enough stuff on Saturday where I can get back to doing everything that I used to do, and eventually, who knows, I might re-extend the shows again, but for now, honestly, the other issue is I can prep for a 1-hour show and do an hour on my head. For some reason, sometimes crossing that barrier to the 2-hour show just seems like there's so much work, so much more work involved in it. And I don't know why that is, but for now, we're just going to shorten everything down to 60-minute segments for the America Off the Rails show, regardless of show night. 5 nights a week, 1 day on Saturday will now be running for 1 hour. The Finding Common Ground show will still be running on Saturday mornings, but now it will only be an hour. And, of course, Opinion Nation, that is currently an hour, will actually be staying that way, at least for the moment. At some point, if Bryce decides he wants to extend the show, I may give him the option, because that's more work for him, less work for me, because all I got to do is push buttons.
Thanks, Rick.
All right, so anyway, lots of stuff going on in the news. I did find a clip, and I hadn't actually briefed anybody on this yet. I just want to kind of play the raw clip and get your take on it, and then kind of give you mine, because I don't know. I heard this, and I hear people kind of freaking out about it, and I just kind of want to know which side you fall on, because there's lots of people, when I found this clip, that weren't real happy about what's going on. So,
All right, let's hear it.
Megan, it's billed as an Islamic tribunal that practices Sharia law, except there are no lawyers. Instead, it's run by 3 imams and a doctor of Islamic studies who serve as arbitrators, primarily for Muslim divorce cases. The men who run the business say it's very similar to tribunals in the Catholic Church dealing with annulments or rabbinical courts used by Orthodox Jews.
We really need Islamic tribunal here. This is just for divorce cases because Muslim women cannot divorce just by final decree in the civil court.
He goes on to stress the Islamic tribunals are voluntary and divorce paperwork is only filed with state courts if both spouses agree. But critics worry about the extreme parts of Sharia law, like men being able to divorce for no reason, yet women must have a reason, and men being allowed to take several wives while women can only marry one man. The mayor of Irving, Texas, says you can't just create your own laws.
Religious freedom is protected under our First Amendment, and we are not in any way, shape, or form trying to prevent that. What we're trying to do is make sure that our laws are followed and respected.
So far, the tribunal has handled 25 divorce cases.
Okay, so I think part of what has everybody that I've read over this stuff on concerned about is apparently this is happening somewhere in Texas. But I don't know. I mean, they're right. There are the same thing kind of happens with Catholic churches, and it also happens in Jewish synagogues where they have rabbinical review panels, and then there's also special steps you have to go through at a Catholic church before you can be divorced. So I'm just kind of wondering, I mean, my honest take on it is, why is everybody freaking out?
Yeah, I was probably going to say the same thing because they expressed it pretty clearly. It's all voluntary, and I think when the media adds the word Sharia law, people immediately flip out. They shut down and it's code red. But I think that, I know that in the Jewish religion, when one wants to go through a similar process as they described, women have to go through extra steps as well. So I think it's kind of injustice to say that this is just among Islam. And I think it's kind of, it should be accepted that if a faith wants to have their own method of having divorce done, then it should be allowed. And they're not, if I believe it like this, I view it like this, that if you're not imposing your beliefs on anybody else, you're not infringing on anybody else's rights, then by all means, go for it. And when they talked about men having the ability to marry more than one woman, but a woman can't marry more than one man, well, where are these same reporters when we watch the show Sister Wives or something in regard to, the Mormon Church or something of that nature? They're pretty silent in regard to that, but when it comes to when it's irrelevant to Islam, then suddenly we see a bit more outcry about it.
Oh, no, there are plenty of reporters that have, I only know this because my wife actually watches the show Sister Wives. Something that I didn't know until the other night, because I had just assumed they were kind of flying in the face of the federal government saying, screw you, we're going to do it anyway. Even if a man in the Mormon sect that practices the whole polygamy thing, even if he's married to more than one wife, he's only legally married to one of them. I didn't know that.
I heard that before.
No, well, I honestly didn't know that because I know that back in the day they just said, screw it, I'm going to be married to as many people as I want to be, and I'll just go to different states to get them done. But I guess they now have basically have what are called spiritual ceremonies, where for the rest of the wives other than the one, all they do is they get married in the church. There's no documentations or licensing required. And I know this because the other night when I was prepping for show stuff for the next day, my wife actually happened to have that show on in here because we have a very large bedroom, so half of it is my studio, and then we put up a partition, and the other half is the bedroom. So basically, I had taken the partition down because all I was doing at that point was editing. So I'm listening to it, and apparently one of these wives, who had been the one that was married to this guy Cody from like day one, had opted to get a divorce, and of course. And it was one of those things where it went from one show right into the other, and of course the buildup of it was like, well, I've been considering this for a long time, and I'm going to go file for a divorce from Cody. And of course they built it up to be the worst thing possible. Well, it turns out the reason she was actually wanting to get divorced from him on paper is because one of the other wives that he'd married had children from another man who had he'd either passed away or has absolutely nothing to do with the children, signed his rights away and all that stuff. So they were concerned that if anything ever happened to her, he had no legal claim to the children. So she was divorcing him so the other wife could marry him. And I'm just like, okay, these are problems you don't normally see. It just seemed a little odd.
Yeah, those shows on like Lifetime or whatever those networks are, they're really odd. Like, they're just really bizarre sometimes. And
yeah, well, nothing beats Honey Boo Boo. Just saying.
Oh, no, nothing beats what do they call her, Smoochie or whatever her nickname is. That is an odd girl. But you know what? They're probably laughing all the way to the bank.
Well, they were. I mean, come on, let's face it. Those people get paid pretty good money once the pilots kick off. They've actually done another show that my wife watched that kind of poked fun at the whole reality TV thing for a couple of episodes. Was a spinoff to Grey's Anatomy. I think it was called Private Practice. They had one of the doctors on there that had been being pushed for a while to do a pilot for a reality TV show, and one of the other doctors was talking to the producers, and they were like, well, how much is he getting paid? They're like, nothing for this one. He's like, nothing? They're like, yeah, but if the show takes off, it's $150,000. He's like, $150,000 for everything? They're like, no, that's per episode. And he's like, where do I get a show? Sign me up. I'm thinking, dang, for $150,000 a show, I think I'd put cameras everywhere. I'm just saying. That's a lot of money.
That is true. I would, yeah, without a doubt.
All right, so I don't know. I mean, I think, again, going back to the clip, I think you're right. I think everybody in America hears Sharia law, and the first thing they think of is somebody getting their hands chopped off for stealing something. Because that's what we read about in the media. I actually, when I found this clip, right above that one was a story about a guy where they had videotaped him in one of the Islamic countries having his hands chopped off for stealing something. I don't remember what it was. And I think that's when everybody hears Sharia law, that's the first thing they think of. Now,
yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly on that.
To play devil's advocate for a moment, I do have to say that I think a lot of the reasons why some people are concerned is we have this whole train of thought in this country of, the whole story of the frog in the pot of water. If you put the frog in the pot of water and you bring it up to boil slowly, it relaxes and eventually it's dead before it knows what happens. But if you throw the frog into the pot of boiling water, its first instinct is to jump out. So to play devil's advocate, I think a lot of the folks that are concerned are thinking, well, at this point we are basically kind of giving what may or may not be a toehold to Sharia law in this country. And I think the biggest thing really with it is I think they're really surprised that something like that would spring up somewhere like Texas. At least that's most of the comments that I was seeing.
Well, I mean, in response to that, we got to realize that when people say, oh, Sharia law is infiltrating the United States, that can't be farther from the truth. I mean, many people of the Muslim faith just want to be American, and there's probably 0.1% who want to turn this nation into a Muslim nation. I don't ever foresee that happening, and I think it's very, how do I put it? People like to be afraid, and I think that when they hear the word Sharia law, it gives them an excuse to be afraid of something, and then it gives them an excuse to dislike or have prejudice towards something. And I think ultimately, in regard to Islam, largely in the United States, people don't necessarily A, understand it, and B, when they hear it, like words like Sharia law, trigger words, then it sparks something that they don't really understand, they're fearful of, and therefore gives them justification to discriminate against.
Well, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you just said there, to be honest. But at the same time, and honestly, that's something, the first part that you brought up, something I never even really thought about. With as much money as we make off of horror movies and everything else, I think you might be right. I think on some level we actually like being afraid of things. Otherwise, why would the movie industry make billions of dollars a year scaring the crap out of us?
That's true. I think our lives would be boring if we weren't afraid of things.
But, I mean, at the same time, the simple fact of the matter is, yeah, there are probably a vast majority of Muslims who want to do nothing but come here and try to build a better life for their families. But the problem is we have this loud, outspoken, vocal minority who has blatantly said at some point our goal is to assume full control of the world, and at one point we will raise our Islamic flag above your White House. What concerns folks, and this is something that I can honestly say because I've seen it happen before and I've read about it in history. What concerns folks is normally those vocal few that eventually get enough control over things that the non-vocal majority, the people that are actually peaceful, wind up relegating themselves to obscurity because they're too afraid to stand up against the folks that are now running the show. And I see it happen time and time again, and that actually will lead to another thing I was going to talk about here in a little bit. But the simple fact of the matter is that vocal minority usually winds up being the one that somehow grabs a hold of the steering wheel. And I think that's what has a lot of folks concerned, because even if you look at what is legitimately a small percentage of the Muslim faith that is these crazy ideologues who want to blow up the world, that I think it's clocked at maybe 10% of their population overall. That's still the entire population of the United States when you look at the numbers. That's what concerns people.
I definitely understand what you're saying. But again, I just feel that they're not organized. They're not... I mean, if you want to call ISIS organized, I would say that's a gross overstatement.
I would say now you're kind of mimicking what Obama said when he called them the JV team, and I don't think that's warranted.
Well, let me rephrase that. If ISIS wanted to infiltrate the United States, I think that they are...
How do we know they haven't already done it?
Well, I mean, you think that there's a organized legion of ISIS militants in the United States?
I would say that our southern border has been open and exposed long enough that we have no way of knowing what's here, who's here, and what their intentions are.
I mean, if we look at the sheer facts, I would say that the apprehension rates on the south border have dropped 50% since 2012. And that's because less people have been trying to cross the border because it's ultimately become harder to cross the border because President Obama has carried out a lot of Bush's tactics on the border.
So you're standing by the fact that it's harder to cross the border when this same time, not 6 months ago, we had people basically flooding the border and pictures of them flooding the border coming from places like Central America. But it's harder to cross the border?
I mean, I'm not saying it's obviously impossible. I'm not saying it's not as hard, but I'm saying it's become harder. And I think it would be pretty hard if millions of ISIS militants were going to come from the Middle East to Mexico all the way into the United States. I think that's a bit of a stretch because...
How would it be a stretch? They have bases in South America.
I would imagine that we monitor every single flight that goes in and out of these areas, of these war-torn areas that we control. I would imagine it would be somewhat difficult, but, the United States has never shocked or surprised me, so perhaps I will leave it open that you could definitely be right.
Well, let me give you the only reason why I think I'm probably pretty sure I'm right and pray every day that I'm wrong. The country of Iran, the one that Obama's all in big talks about, but we'll save that for your show because I know that was going to be one of your primary topics. They have bases in South America. So, theoretically speaking, there could be military flights going to South America with militants who can then come up and, again, I'm going to sound racist, but I've said it before, I'll say it again, and I don't really care. If you take the standard Islamic wear off of someone and put them in standard clothing, and you stand someone of Muslim descent right next to someone who is a Mexican, you really can't tell the difference. Not just by looking at them. Because, let's face it, we don't see people like that every day. So there are differences, and if you see them every day, you'll notice them. That's why when you look at someone who's from China and you call them Japanese, they look at you and say, "No, dumbass, I'm Japanese, not Chinese. What's the matter with you?" We're totally different, but we can't see that because we don't see them every day. So there are plenty of opportunities for folks to have come across the border. And honestly, even if it is harder now, how long has our border been exposed?
Well, I must mention one part, though. You did leave out one key fact, that Iran is just as opposed to ISIS as we are. Because many people don't like to know this, but Iran, to an extent, operates under having a democracy. I mean, I know it doesn't necessarily work out, but women vote in Iran. Iran isn't necessarily a country to look up to when talking about democracy, considering that they're run by an autocratic leader. That is largely our fault. But, I think in this, Benjamin Netanyahu kind of went into it. He said the enemy of our enemy in this case is our enemy, but the enemy of our enemy is genuinely our friend. And ISIS is a mutually shared enemy to many countries in the Arab world.
Okay,
and I'm not defending Iran's actions, but I am
hang on a second, because first of all, I never said that Iran was going to sneak over people from ISIS. I said they could be sneaking over people. There are other folks that are Islamic extremists other than ISIL that Iran is actually does work with because they fund terror. So let's not mince words. My other issue with this is the whole action of the whole Sun Tzu art of war thing of the enemy of my enemy is my friend is what's landed us in the majority of the mess that we're in all over the world, and we really need to stop living by that axiom.
That is fair to say, yes. Yeah, you're probably right on that one.
I mean, because let's face it, the enemy of the enemy is my friend is what's caused the majority of our foreign policy over the last 200 years. And how well has any of that worked out? Because anybody that we wind up supporting in that area, we eventually wind up fighting later. So I really don't want us, number one, supporting Iran because I don't agree with a lot of their policies. I understand that the people there may want to be free. So this is... Let's just pretend, for the sake of argument, that crazy old rowdy me was president for 5 minutes. What I would be doing is finding ways to get the message out to the Iranian people that we do not have a problem with you, but we have a problem with your leadership. And as long as that leadership remains in place, so will these sanctions because we don't have a choice.
But, yeah, no, we found common ground. I agree with
you. Okay, so... Wow, is it really already almost been a half an hour?
Wow.
Now I'm trying to remember why we did 2 hours on the show to begin with, because it flies by. Okay, so last major thing I really kind of wanted to touch on, and then we'll wind up having to take the break, and then we'll just finish up with whatever else comes to mind, because there were a few other stories that I saw. Something that honestly disturbed me a little bit, and we'll kind of touch on it, then we'll take the break, then we'll come back to it. When I was researching some stuff, and, I'm a baseball fan. It's about 30 days from opening day. So anytime I start seeing things that pop up about baseball, I'm like, oh, cool, let's read about this. This one disturbs me just a little. So, and actually, instead of just going from memory, I do believe I still have the article up here somewhere. So this may take a little bit longer than I thought, so we may just run the break afterwards. So the headline to this story is, after speaking honestly about his religious views, baseball player instructed to talk only sports. Baseball player Daniel Murphy thinks it's, and I have to, up front, disclaimer, this is about the gay life, the whole gay marriage thing, all that fun stuff. But, so just to give everybody a little bit of a heads up. Baseball player Daniel Murphy thinks it's wrong to practice a gay lifestyle, and that is, of course, in quotation marks. Now he's no longer allowed to talk about his religious beliefs, however. Why is the nation even discussing what Murphy, a second baseman for the New York Mets, thinks about gays and lesbians? Well, because after Billy Beane, a gay former Major League Baseball player, who now serves as the league's ambassador for inclusion, visited the Mets, a reporter talked to Murphy. According to the New Jersey Advanced Media report, Murphy is ready for a gay teammate, and Murphy, a devout Christian, said he would embrace Beane despite a divergence in their beliefs. Murphy took pains to clarify that while he opposed Bean's choice, he was open to getting to know Bean. I disagree with his lifestyle, Murphy said of Bean. I do disagree with the fact that Billy is a homosexual. That doesn't mean I can't still invest in him and get to know him. Murphy continued, maybe as a Christian, we haven't been as articulate as we could be in describing what our actual stance is on homosexuality. We love the people, we disagree with the lifestyle. That's the way I would describe it for me. It's the same way that there are aspects of my life that I'm trying to surrender to Christ in my own life. And that's the last we're going to hear from Murphy on the subject. On Wednesday, an ESPN story headlined "Murphy Now to Talk Baseball Only" appeared. The story's first line was, New York Mets second baseman Daniel Murphy will no longer be allowed to address his religious beliefs and will stick to baseball, a team spokesman said Wednesday. Where's the tolerance? True, Murphy got to keep his job, unlike former Mozilla CEO Brendan Eich and Atlanta Fire Chief Kevin Cochran, both of whom had to step down after their personal views on same-sex marriage received attention. But why can't Murphy be honest about his views? After all, he didn't make his comments out of the blue. Bean's visit was publicized. Murphy wasn't just randomly talking, but was reacting to a specific event. Bean himself wrote in an MLB.com column he appreciated that Daniel spoke the truth. Bean continued, I respect him, and I want everyone to know that he was respectful of me. We have baseball in common, and for now that might be the only thing, but it's a start. Inclusion means everyone, plain and simple. Daniel is a part of that group. What we're seeing here is a dialogue. Bean and Murphy are both being honest about their views. They're also both clearly trying to be considerate and respectful of the other's views. That's what our society needs. Americans are divided on a host of controversial issues, from abortion to wars to vaccines to, yes, same-sex marriage. The way to work together and live in harmony isn't to pretend we all agree. It isn't to silence those who have controversial positions. Instead, we need to keep having honest and genuine conversations about these matters, as awkward and painful and frustrating as those conversations can be. Yes, it would be easier if we could all just get along, but we realize that most of us are motivated by what we think is true, by what we think is moral. Those urges are good and positive. They are something we should fight to preserve. We don't want to live in an amoral society where the only value is conformity. We want to be a nation that isn't afraid of disagreements, particularly when both sides are striving to create a society that cherishes what is right and good. Murphy and Bean were showing us the way forward. It's too bad the Mets have made sure their dialogue can't continue.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I understand why the Mets... First off, let's take where the Mets are located. They're located in New York State, New York City. Very liberal area, especially New York City. So, their target market is people who are rather liberal. And when Daniel Murphy speaks with his Mets hat on, or when he speaks in his locker room or whatever, or even speaking as a person, he's also speaking on behalf of where he works. And if the place of where he works doesn't necessarily align with those views, and he's on or representing their views, or representing their name, it might just be a thing where they just don't want him having connection to their name and that topic at the same time. It'd be like if I was working for somebody and started saying things that didn't align with their views at all, and were just to their belief outrageous. They might not want me to say it while I'm under their name.
To quote Obama, let me be clear. Most of what you say I don't agree with. So that argument doesn't always hold water. Just saying.
I mean, I do appreciate the Billy Bean's reaction, but I think that, we live in a world, or at least in a country, where the laws on homosexuality are quickly changing. And by June, they'll probably be fully changed. And I think that our nation over the past 40 years has become much more accepting. Actually, that's just a fact, that we've become more accepting of the homosexual community to the point where it's become probably almost like the civil rights movement in regard to numbers. And I think that when we look at a franchise like the Mets, they just don't want somebody on their team spouting out this stuff, because then it deters people who already aren't coming to Citi Field.
Well, if they already weren't coming anyway, what difference does it make?
That's true, too. I mean, I like to go to Mets games a lot because they're cheap tickets, and you get a nice view because nobody's there. But, I mean, I guess they're just saving their one person who comes, I guess that's me.
So much for that East Coast sponsorship I was working on there, buddy. No, I'm just playing. All right, so anyway, it is actually about time for us to take a break. Then I do have a couple other stories I still wanted to kind of touch on. And
that was an interesting one, though. I'm glad you brought that up because, it's not really either side. You could kind of argue both sides and feel understandable for both sides. So, I mean, it's kind of one of those things where it's just like give or take.
Well, I mean, I agree with the overall perspective of the article. At this point, the only way that we're going to put half of this stuff to bed is if we actually openly start talking about it instead of fighting with each other over it. That's been my stance from day one. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I don't care if you're left of center, right of center, center of center. Simple fact of the matter is, if we'd actually sit down and talk to each other, we would realize we have a lot more in common with each other than we do these idiots in D.C. that live in a bubble and have no idea what's going on around them because they're too busy listening to lobbyists and lining their pockets. So,
you know what? You just said it better than anyone I think could. That's exactly it.
All right. So anyway, we do have to take a break, folks. We'll be right back here in just a couple minutes. Do hope you've enjoyed the show so far. We'll be right back and finish up with the last half. I am Rick Robinson. You are listening to Finding Common Ground. We'll be right back with you.
Come with me now. Come with me now.
K98 Talk is expanding its lineup for 2015. This means we are expanding our advertising base. Whether you're a startup trying to push through to the next level or an established business trying to supplement your advertising budget, web-based advertising is a solid investment. Thanks to Talk's newest partnership with TuneIn Radio and instant access to our sister station, K98 FM, we give you worldwide access at a reasonable cost. Interested parties should email us at sales@k98fm.com.
This is Misty, owner of Wax It Studio in Edmond, Oklahoma, and I'm here to talk to you about a skincare product called Theramedics. Theramedics has a wonderful line of products from anti-aging to hyperpigmentations all the way to acne. In fact, everyone at some point in our life is affected by acne. Acne can cause a great deal of embarrassment and anxiety, and in order to prevent and help other people, I have tapped into this wonderful product called Theramedics. Visit my website at www.prettyskindeep.com. Again, that's www.prettyskindeep.com.
If you like your health care plan, you'll be able to keep your health care plan.
This is the most transparent administration in history. Not even a smidgen of corruption.
Fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. What difference at this point does it make?
If you got a business, you didn't build that.
The feeling most people get when they hear a Barack Obama speech, I felt this thrill going up my leg. I mean, I don't have that too often.
Steady.
It's time to hear the truth about America's biggest challenges. Ricky Robinson, host of America Off the Rails, will tackle the important issues facing America today as he tries to keep America from coming off the track. Get ready to hear the truth every Monday through Friday starting at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 Central, and on Saturdays at 12 p.m. Eastern and 11 Central here on K98Talk.com and the Spark Radio Network. Tune into The Family Factor with Denny C. every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning at 5 a.m. as he looks at all the challenges facing the family today. Denny will give you a refreshingly new look at tackling some of the biggest issues. So start your day off on the right foot with Denny C. and The Family Factor, right here on K98Talk.com.
Alright, folks, we're back. We're live. This is Finding Common Ground. I'm your host, Rick Robinson, joined today by Bryce Robinson. So far, we have been talking everything from Sharia law to gay marriage, and it's not going to get any better, because Hillary has once again made the news. Yay!
I had a feeling in the back of my mind that you were going to bring this one up, but go for it.
Okay, so how much of this story have you heard about?
The emails?
Yep.
Good deal about it, but I'll let you take it.
No. I've had the driver's seat most of the show. What do you got on this one?
All right. I mean, first off, we all know I'm an Elizabeth Warren fan, not to make your ears bleed or anything, and
too late.
And you know, to have a good politician, you have to trust them, and I feel that Hillary Clinton's never one that you can trust, but she makes up such a big picture of the upcoming Democratic Party. So, I mean, in regard to this email scandal, and I heard that it actually is now bringing new light to Benghazi, but, you know, I doubt that will ever go away. But, you know, the fact that she's using private emails, I mean, I would love to see where it goes, but I don't think it'll go anywhere. I think that the news is just trying or the media is just trying as hard as it can to destroy the movement for Ready for Hillary movement. But I think it's a inevitable factor that she's destined to run and probably take the nomination, even though I think you and I, for different reasons, are both wishing the same thing, that she won't get it.
Okay, so I have a question, because this is what concerns me, because everybody knows, and I mean, let's not even try to sugarcoat it. The media usually falls decidedly Democratic. So what is it that they know about Hillary that has them all going, oh no, this cannot happen, we have to destroy this woman at all costs? Because this is not normally what they do to one of their own.
You know why? Because I think that Hillary largely, you know, she isn't as liberal as she seems. If we look at her track record, she seems to kind of be a war hawk in regard to insurrection, or actually sending troops into the Middle East. And she seems to be rather conservative, but since in regard to a liberal aspect, but since she was with Bill Clinton, she has a picture of being this liberal woman.
You just used the name Hillary and the word conservative in the same sentence. Excuse me, I have to go throw up now.
in a liberal person's aspect, like from my point of view, she is more to the right than Elizabeth Warren. We can all agree on that. She's more to the right than someone like Bernie Sanders, or she's more to the right than someone like Cory Booker. She is largely more to the right when looking at all the Democrats.
Okay,
and
so devil's advocate for a moment here. Who the hell is not more to the right of Elizabeth Warren?
Bernie Sanders. Okay, come on, that guy, he is lefter than left.
Well, that's the same thing I would say about Elizabeth Warren, but considering I kind of live at least slightly over in right of center land, I guess everything kind of looks left to me.
But she looks so, oh God, if she would run for office, she'd
Please,
be
God,
amazing. No. I'm just pontificating about a bright future with, you know, a Warren presidency.
Excuse us for a moment, folks. I think Bryce might need a moment alone for his love affair with Elizabeth Warren. We're going to take another quick break. Just saying. Holy cow, Elizabeth Warren. Come on. Dude, I mean, first of all, come on. What is it? I mean, honest question, and this is not me trying to make fun. What is it about her that has drawn your interest that makes you think she would be a good candidate?
Because she is not afraid to take on the big donors or the big corporations that all people, even like Obama, are afraid of, because they know that they have the power of the wallet. And Elizabeth Warren is just kind of trying to grab the bull by the horns.
Have you heard her talk?
We need more people, like, regardless of what your beliefs are, the core fact that she is just trying to solve the problem. If you're a Republican, if you're a Democrat, if you're just trying to solve the problem, you're not worried about, Sheldon Adelson funding your campaign, then I will probably trust you and I'll probably support you.
Okay. No, not to cut you off, but yeah. But let's be honest for a second. There were lots of Republicans who ran this last time on vote for us and we're going to do the right thing. We get all of these people that say, hey, we're not going to be for the big guy. We're going to go into D.C. We're going to fix the problems, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. They ain't fixed shit since they've been there. If anything, they're making things worse. So
a lot of those people are secretly funded by, backdoor Koch brother Americans for Prosperity or whatever. And a lot of them don't even have the qualifications to be in the positions they are, but again, they are. And a lot of them make stupid mistakes, like, Todd Aitken, because he was one of those for the change kind of guys, and he said that women could shut down the abortion rape pregnancy process. But the fact that Elizabeth Warren has already had so much success, that she's gotten a new banking committee done, that she's been appointed to this new position of Senate power to kind of prop up her power among the Senate. The fact that the things that she's accomplished already in regard to environmental regulations, what she's spoken out against in regard to LGBT discrimination, just her sheer presence and movement against the banks. The fact that she got like $8.9 billion from JP Morgan to pay back after the banking collapse. She's really just going after it, and I admire that, and I think we really need more people like that, regardless of where you stand. But again, like, obviously there are going to be some deterrents if you're in opposition to some of my views. Like, if you were just like gay, like Ben Carson, being gay is a choice, I'm not really going to support you there. But,
Well, I mean, I have to admit, I wish Ben Carson would have stayed out of that particular argument. I mean, I have to tell you, I'm not sure on that one myself, only because I know people that have legitimately, at some point, it actually, they give you the impression that they did at some point make a choice. But
when did you choose to be straight, I mean...
Well, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I know people that have gone through the whole regular marriage, had kids, everything else, and then at some point have just made the decision, no, this isn't me, I should have been doing this all along. So I think that's where a lot of people get the illusion that at some point they've made a choice, when really what they've done is maybe not been honest with themselves from the get-go, and therefore have given people the wrong impression, which was honestly what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I don't know enough about it one way or the other. I know that I've never really been interested in another guy ever, not even in the whole bromance way that everybody jokes about. I just don't go that way. It doesn't work for me. I can legitimately say that because one of the security company that I ran for forever, we actually did the security for that whole. And honestly, I didn't even know that place was here until the first day I got posted there when I worked for another company. But there is a whole district here where there's nothing but basically the whole area is LGBT, and there's restaurants and clubs and everything else. We ran security for the whole thing, so I was in that community protecting them for over a decade. So I mean, I got to know them really well, which is one of the reasons why I'm not your typical conservative gay bad, beat them up, bash them because they're not good. My biggest thing with all of it, even the gay marriage argument, is they had everything they wanted at one point because everybody had conceded, let's just do the whole civil union thing. They were even ready to the point to make it to where the government did nothing but civil unions. And then the actual spiritual marriages were handled at the churches. And that is my opinion as to how we should do everything. The government needs to get out of the marriage business altogether. The most they should be doing is a civil, legal, binding contract of people joining their assets. After that, everything else needs to be handled in your church of choice. That would solve the entire problem.
Well, yeah. I mean, from a blanket point of view, I do agree with you, but then you just have to realize that there are some things that it's just blatant discrimination. That if we can't, I don't think we should be able to say that you can't get the term married because the church doesn't agree with your point of view. Because remember, we are not a Christian nation, we are not a Jewish nation, nor are we a Muslim or Islamic nation. So to say that you can't be
But
this
the simple fact of the matter is there are churches that disagree with that. So in order to make it as fair and equitable to everybody, let's stop trying to change the term. Let's stop having the argument altogether. Let's get the government out of the marriage business, since there are actual religious connotations to the term marriage to begin with, and make whatever actions that you need to have a license for, where you're actually licensed and recognized by the state, more of a union between two parties. Then that way the state still gets to collect all the money they get off of the whole licensing issue, which is the whole reason the states don't want it to go away in the first place. And then we still don't have the issue of a gay couple beating down a Baptist church door because they don't want to marry them, because they can then go to whatever church they choose to get the ceremony taken care of, and there's not any issues with, well, we don't want to do your marriage here. As far as the whole argument with the bakeries and everything else that don't want to do the anti-gay or the gay support things, there are smarter ways to make that argument. You can look at someone and say, no, I'm sorry, I'm booked up for the next few months, but hey, Joe Schmo down the street has a bakery, why don't you go talk to them? Not, I'm not going to bake your cake because you're a homosexual and I don't agree with that there, so you need to get the hell out of my shop.
Yeah,
if you say that, you're a dumbass.
Yeah, and exactly. And if, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, someone could say, I'm not going to make this cake for you because you're black. So just because we take black and make it into, a sexual orientation, now suddenly it kind of is rebirthed. And I think we should suppress that. And I agree with what you just said, that, there's, I guess, if you want to discriminate, there's better ways to do it. But I think we should just make it general. You cannot do that in this country, that everybody is equal. That's what the Founding Fathers wanted. They wanted everybody to be equal. I mean, there's even arguments to say that a lot of the Founding Fathers, regardless of the positions that they held in regard to being a slave owner or not, a lot of them eventually said or viewed that, even blacks would be equal, that even everybody would be equal. And even
even the Founding Fathers knew at some point that slavery was going to become a thing of the past. That's why the 3/5 clause that everybody has such a cow about was in the Constitution in the first place. It wasn't to discriminate against black people; it was to protect them from the people that actually owned them at the time, being able to say, "Well, no, I have 300 slaves, so therefore, when I vote, I should get 301 votes." That's why the 3/5 clause came into play, because then the slave owners couldn't vote in the stead of their slaves. And the other thing that nobody talks about, and I don't know why this isn't in history classes, at least it wasn't when I went, and I can find record after record after record of it, there were plenty of free black people during those times that held slaves of their own that were also black, but nobody talks about that.
The number is actually, I think, 10% of slaves in the South were owned by former slaves.
But that's my point. That's 10%, and nobody talks about it.
That's true.
In my opinion, that would shut down a lot of the argument that's going on about reparations and everything else, because there's parts of this that nobody talks about. Yes, some people from Africa were sold into slavery. What nobody talks about is the fact that those were tribes that were warring with one another. The tribe that won saw an opportunity to make money, so they sold the people that they had already enslaved there to other people to take them to another country to make them slaves here, and 10% of those people eventually became slave owners of their own. I mean, let's just face it, in that day and time, and all the way through whatever religious texts you want to use, and whatever anything else you want to look at, slavery was a commonplace thing. Let's face it, slavery is still going on today. Nobody wants to talk about it, though.
That is true.
Muslim nations still have slaves.
That is true. Iran still has slaves. Pakistan has slaves.
But that's what I'm saying. I mean, why are we still having all the arguments here? And I mean, and then we have people that are in positions of power in our Congress and our Senate, standing in places like the congressional floor, making statements about how she now stands here as a freed slave. Really, I didn't realize you were over 200 years old.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to disagree with you there. But let's remember, we have a divisive history in this country, and a lot of it, even predates slavery in this country, and not slavery, predates the founding fathers coming together and making this nation. We just have a divisive history, and I think now, especially now, with the creation of social media and the ability to contact somebody instantaneously, we're morphing our ideas at a quicker pace than ever before. And for that reason, we want the same equality for everybody because we can contact everybody and tell them what it's like. So I don't think it's a bad thing that, if a gay person walks into a bakery and says, I want a cake, and they say, no, you're gay, get out, or we're booked for the next, week, I do understand why we need that to end. And I do understand, again, the argument, maybe it's against their beliefs, but again, we live in a nation where everybody should be equal and nobody should be discriminated against. That's just my belief.
But in essence, you're discriminating against someone's beliefs. At the same time, you're saying we shouldn't discriminate against other people.
Yeah, again, it's one of those things where I think it just comes down to your core moral standpoint. And for someone like me who's just open about, being pro-homosexuality or pro-LGBTQ, I will align with, I guess, that. But I think that when the history books remember our time, I think that they will look at the LGBTQ movement and put it in a similar light to the civil rights movement, because it was a movement to give people more equality rather than take it away. When we look at a bakery owner who we are now discriminating against their beliefs, I think that their beliefs have been around for a very long time. I don't think they're going away. No one's infringing on their rights to go and purchase anything. So I don't think they should do it to anybody else. And if you don't want to make something for somebody, I mean, I guess that's understandable, and I'm sure that will be clogging our courts forever.
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think this shouldn't be an argument that never comes to the forefront anyway, unless you're dumb enough to actually make the statement, no, I'm not going to make this for you because I don't agree with the decisions that you've made. If you're dumb enough to say that out loud, then you deserve whatever happens to you. But we shouldn't be able to look at someone and say, because you believe my lifestyle is wrong, I'm going to make you make this cake for me, or if you don't, I'm going to sue you. Well, that shouldn't be happening, much like we shouldn't have these vocal groups that have already started doing it, now that there are states where the homosexual marriages are legal, that they're forcing churches to marry them. That shouldn't be happening either.
What if I disagreed with somebody, being a freed black person? What if I am actually that racist that I say I don't agree that you should be equal, and therefore I don't want to make you something, or something of that nature?
If you're dumb enough to say that out loud, you deserve whatever happens to you. Again, if you can find a way to say it without making yourself sound like a dumbass, you're free to have and practice whatever beliefs you choose, as long as you don't openly infringe on someone else.
Well, I guess that's my point, and the fact that we do have people who are dumb enough to phrase it like that, because we've already seen it, then yeah, I guess I agree with you. They deserve whatever they get.
I mean, because let's face it, the biggest argument that everybody has about homosexuality is there are specific scriptures, no matter which book you look at, that dictate that shouldn't be happening. Now, at some point, my particular faith had a bit of a reformation, and we started looking at things and saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't be so harsh on people that don't agree with some of the things that we don't agree with, which is my stance on it, which is why I have friends that I talk to on a daily basis that are gay, and I don't treat them any differently than I treat anybody else. And I wouldn't, if they wanted me to make them a cake for their wedding, I'm going to make them a cake for their wedding. I don't care. But if there are people that say, hey, I don't necessarily agree with this at all, and they want to find a way to word it that it doesn't make them sound like complete and total asshats, who am I to tell them that they can't stand on religious convictions to not do something? I agree with you. It's just plain and simple.
Holy cow. No, that is true. And I think it's a two-way street. It goes both ways. And I largely agree with you. But I just want to bring up something that I noticed. Whenever if you read any of these religious scriptures, they never talk about being a lesbian. You ever notice that? They just say, thou shalt not lay with another man. They never talk about women.
Well, actually, if you go back to the original scriptures, a lot of the things that they used to describe people at that point were genderless. It's the fact that we largely became a patriarchal society along the way that has kind of shifted that to. I mean, if you notice, even in those books, most of the time, the only names they ever really list are male. That's more of a reflection of the translations over time than more to do with the actual religion itself.
That's interesting. I never really heard that perspective. So you're just saying because it's like a male-dominated society that's how it was translated?
Well, yeah, basically. I mean, think about it for a second. That's the same thing that still happens today in the countries that are practicing Sharia, because women typically have less of a role. Most of the things you hear about are guys. It's like I didn't know until there was a whole argument that came up on Twitter that there were times when men were discriminated against when it comes to Sharia too, and attacked almost as often. But the only thing we hear about are when the women are persecuted, but it happens to men too. I've actually been finding more and more stories about that. I find that almost actually a little more disturbing, that it goes on and nobody really talks about it, because only apparently the stories about the women being attacked are the ones that are gaining the traction in the media.
No, wait, I know it's 11 o'clock, but can I ask you a question before, if you want to end the show?
Sure.
Okay. Did you see James Inhofe's snowball in the Senate?
No, actually, I did not.
Oh, okay. Well, I do want you to watch that. It's a statement about climate change, and I want you to definitely get back to me on this one in our next show, that basically to denounce the validity of climate change and scientists, before he comes into the Senate chamber, he brings in a snowball in a plastic bag, and he says, essentially, I got this from outside. It's cold outside for this time of year, so climate change is not real. And he throws it. He goes, "Here, Mr. President." And he throws him the snowball. And this is the man who is the head of our environmental committee in our Senate.
Okay, well, just to give you my honest take on the whole climate change argument before I watched this video, you need to go back and start reading the literature that started in the late 60s, because it was originally supposed to be global warming. When that didn't happen, or global cooling, then when that didn't happen, it became global warming. Now, because they haven't been able to find an argument to support either one of those stances, they came up with this blanket idea, and now they're calling it climate change, because no matter what happens, you can't say the climate's not changing. My honest argument with all of this is we've only been tracking weather-related phenomenon for a little bit over a century. It is rather arrogant and ironic that man could think that we could cause that much damage to our environment in 100 years, to where we are the sole impact as to what's causing climate change. Because let's face it,
look at how much CO2 per parts per million is entered into the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution, and you look at the trend, you will see a clear correlation between increase in CO2 emission to increase in drastic weather patterns.
But that's my point. It all changes every decade. Originally, the rising in CO2 was supposed to lead to the whole global temperature cooling off. Then when that didn't happen, it turned into, well, since it didn't cool off, look, it's getting warmer, so the higher CO2 levels must work like what happens in a greenhouse. So now all of a sudden, the Earth's going to get warmer. Remember Al Gore, the Earth has a temperature. What do you do when you have a temperature? You go to the doctor. By 2015, we won't have any polar ice caps. Then when none of that happened, now all of a sudden, a few years after they realized that none of their arguments were holding water, they've suddenly came up with the idea of climate change. Again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't do things to protect the environment, and I'm not saying that there aren't things that we should do, because honestly, as a Christian, my Bible tells me that I'm supposed to be a good steward of the earth. That means I shouldn't be throwing trash on the ground, I should be recycling, and I should be doing things to take better care of the planet. Number one, so I can make sure that my children still have a planet to use when they get here, when they're adults. But that doesn't mean that I need to buy into all the government mumbo-jumbo hocus-pocus, because 10 years from now, it's all going to change again. Trust me, you'll see it, and then you'll go, it happened again, because I've already seen it happen twice.
Let me just put it this way. Let's throw climate change out the window. Let's just say that's not even existing right now. The sheer fact that James Inhofe doesn't believe that we are affecting our environment through our energy policy is an outrage. And if you think about it, we cannot deny that coal plants produce a set amount of CO2, that they've led to the respiratory malfunction of over 13,000 people, causing death, and that they leak hazardous gases such as sulfur, xenon, and other horrible elements to our atmosphere. So regardless of whether you believe we are actually affecting the climate, the fact that we are affecting our own air and water in regard to the fracking process, or even pollutants that enter into the atmosphere from coal plants, oil plants, and then rain down into our water systems, it is undeniable that we are affecting the environment in which we live and affecting the health of our people.
Okay, so I have a question.
Yes.
So we do all of this work to make sure the air over America is clean, right?
Yes.
So what happens when, as we know, the Earth is a closed environment? So what happens when all the crap that's not being regulated in China comes over here? Because we live in an enclosed environment. The air from China eventually gets here, and they don't have any of the regulations that we have.
Well, I mean, they are starting to implement more and more regulations. Even from Obama's visit to China, by 2030, they'd be curbing emissions pretty drastically.
Yeah,
but
by 2030.
Also, I do need to make this a clear point, though, that excuse me, if you want to even talk about the ozone layer, that's the point I'm trying to bring up, is that the ozone layer was being destroyed by CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, that were largely in hairsprays and different aerosol cans, actually patched itself up over the United States. And we can see that the atmosphere or air that moves around the world is largely filtered by oceans and trees before it gets from continent to continent. So you'd be pretty surprised what type of air quality would transmit from China to the United States. But
hang on. There was a reason I went there. So basically what you're telling me is no matter what we've been doing to the environment, the Earth has its own filtration system built into it.
Well, no, because that ultimately that junk still goes somewhere, and that's a huge problem. But I would say that the argument that you brought up is kind of like the quitters' argument that, well, if they're doing it,
No, I didn't bring that argument up for that perspective. You just said exactly what I wanted you to say. The air quality as it moves and circulates throughout the world gets cleaned up because the Earth has its own filtration system built into it.
I'm not saying that it gets cleaned up. I'm saying that as it moves...
You said it was largely pure as it moves from continent to continent.
I'm not saying... I'm saying that it gets... that different particles do come out.
Did you or did you not say that it is largely pure as it moves from continent to continent?
No, I did say that.
Thank you. That's all I wanted you to say.
No, but I'm saying that material will still end up going somewhere. That sulfur dioxide will still end up in the ocean of the Atlantic, or will still end up being inhaled by somebody in Africa, or somebody even in the United States. And to a large extent, we can see the movement of CO2. Remember, CO2 is heavier than oxygen, so it does largely fall back and create hazardous air for those living in the closed vicinity. So someone polluting in China will largely feel the effects in China because it will ultimately fall back on their cities. So, I mean, some of it does move to the United States, but largely that's not the case because it's not as heavy.
No, I understand. But my only point that I'm trying to make is I never said that we shouldn't be taking precautions and making sure that we're making things better. What I've said largely and will continue to say is at this point, the EPA, what started out with the best of intentions, has now become this large behemoth entity that is only concerned with feeding itself and continuing to grow its power base, much like every other branch of the government does.
That is true, to a pretty large extent.
Okay, so anyway, we are now almost 10 minutes into your showtime, so I think we need to wrap this one up.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
All right, so folks, we're going to shut this one down for the day. We will be back with you next Saturday at 9 for the now 60-minute version of the Finding Common Ground show. Here in just a couple of minutes, we'll be right back with Opinion Nation with your host, Bryce Robbins, and I will take a back seat and be the button pusher. So you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. Then as soon as this show, or that show is concluded, we will go right straight into America Off the Rails, now for also its shortened version from 11 to noon. And then I will be back with you Monday evening. Just to give everybody a little bit of a heads up, I do have guests planning on being with me sometime next week. We haven't narrowed down a time yet. Once I have a more of a time frame, I will definitely let you know. They've been on with me before. They're going to come back and hang out again. It's the hosts of Voices of Global Freedom Radio, who also are largely and have been involved in counterterrorism since the inception of the idea back in the early 70s. They're going to hang out and talk about some of these most recent things that have been going on with Iran and everything else, and kind of give us their perspectives. But they will be with me at some point, sometime next week. And at this point, I'm going to stop talking so Bryce can take a front seat here. You'll hear a little bit of a fade-out music, then you're going to hear a couple of commercials, and then you'll, of course, hear the usual stuff, and then Bryce takes over the reins. You guys have a good rest of your weekend.
They say we offer simple answers to complex problems. But perhaps there is a simple answer. Not an easy answer, but simple.
If you like your health care plan, you'll be able to keep your health care plan.
This is the most transparent administration in history. Not even a smidgen of corruption.
Fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. What difference at this point does it make?
If you got a business, you didn't build that.
The feeling most people get when they hear a Barack Obama speech, I felt this thrill going up my leg. I mean, I don't have that too often.
Steady.
It's time to hear the truth about America's biggest challenges. Ricky Robinson, host of America Off the Rails, will tackle the important issues facing America today as he tries to keep America from coming off the track. Get ready to hear the truth every Monday through Friday starting at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 Central, and on Saturdays at 12 p.m. Eastern and 11 Central here on K98Talk.com and the Spark Radio Network.
Welcome to the face. Welcome to the face of the new democracy.
This is Misty, owner of Wax It Studio in Edmond, Oklahoma, and I'm here to talk to you about a skincare product called Theramedics. Theramedics has a wonderful line of products from anti-aging to hyperpigmentations all the way to acne. In fact, everyone at some point in our life is affected by acne. Acne can cause a great deal of embarrassment and anxiety, and in order to prevent and help other people, I have tapped into this wonderful product called Theramedics. Visit my website at www.prettyskindeep.com. Again, that's www.prettyskindeep.com. This is Misty, owner of Wax It Studio in Edmond, Oklahoma, and I'm here to talk to you about a